Good afternoon, morning, evening, or night, ladies and gents. My name is Alex, and this episode's subject comes in from Asobi. Are there any games that changed you or made you look at things differently? Don't know why I pronounce it like that, but... So, in short, the answer is yes, and for a multitude of reasons. I think what he was getting at was that change how you think in one way or another, maybe in a more grand sense, in like maybe a social sense or a religious sense, or something grand like that. And I'm not necessarily going to talk about specific things like that because I don't think many games do touch on important subjects like a lot of these things, like a lot of more nuanced movies and music, books and so on can do, because video games are such a young art form, as we always say over and over again, but it's true. But all that aside, that's not to say that there aren't plenty that have changed the way I think, whether it be in terms of the quality of video game storytelling or just left me in awe in how good this thing is, and how have I not had this thing in my life up until this point. First off, I'm going to mention a couple that I don't think I was even conscious of at the time. The first one being Pokemon Fire Red, which was basically my first ever RPG. You don't even really think about Pokemon games as an RPG because they're so simple, but they are baby's first RPG. And it teaches you all these fundamental basics and things, and how these huge games can be crafted in a certain way, and it's really easy and simple to understand. And while consciously I might not have noticed that it was making me think about games differently, but it did. Which leads me into a game that I find to be more important to me. Pokemon's fine, they're well-made games and whatnot, but I don't really have much of an affinity for them. Whereas Final Fantasy XII, I know people are really mixed on the game. Like, it seems to be a really extreme Marmite reaction to it. Everyone seems to love it or hate it. I'm firmly in the love it camp, mainly because I'm blinded by nostalgia. Because for me, it was my first proper extreme JRPG, like all these systems, all these crazy things you have to wrap your head around. And it was the first game of that sort of magnitude that I conquered, defeated, and became obsessed with. The first game I sunk hundreds of hours into that wasn't like a shooter or a platformer or something easy to digest like that. So Final Fantasy XII certainly, it changed how I thought about games as a whole, in terms of games can really be these huge, almost living worlds that you can almost start to sink more time into and obsess over more than the real world, which is kind of a scary thought. But while I might not thought about it at the time of playing it, because it was just, hey, I got a new video game, I'm going to play it now. For me, it's always going to be that one game for me that sort of opened heaven's doors to this whole new realm of games that I'd totally been missing out on prior to that. But apart from that, mostly what I look for now in games, in terms of things that have changed and made me look or think differently about certain elements of games and whatnot, I'm leaning more towards more recent games, such as, I just have to get this out of my brain now, The Last of Us. When I played it, I think I played it in the July, like only a month or two after it came out. I actually bought a PlayStation 3 just to play that game, because something about it was just really interesting and intriguing to me. And I wasn't disappointed by it. It was I think it's one of the first games that's got a genuine sort of reaction from, in terms of, wow, like, this is the sort of thing that you could show someone who's not into games to convince them that you can take it seriously now. I have some issues and some really specific nitpicks about how maybe storytelling is done in that game, but I think as a story and the way they tell the story is so nuanced and well written, mainly in terms of like character, especially voice acting and character interaction and stories and that sort of stuff. I think it's probably the best written game I've ever played. And coincidentally, I actually played another game today as of recording this that is really interesting and is very relevant to this question, and that's Spec Ops: The Line. I think quite an underrated game that sort of went under a lot of people's radars, but I picked it up and I think it was the winter Steam sale. I only played through it today, and while I wasn't too hot in the first half of it, once certain things happen in the second half, it becomes this really interesting sort of character study on a bunch of different themes and issues that you don't go into expecting to see. You're playing this somewhat generic shooter, and then suddenly these things start to happen, and it makes you question kind of the fabric of how games like that have made you. It questions themes and things that you always do in games like this. It kind of shines a light on it in a really interesting and thought-provoking way, especially because of the player agency involved. The whole choice thing makes it a very unique and special experience. Special being the key word, I think. That's definitely changed how I think about especially storytelling in games and how effective it can be, because with a book, with a TV show, something like that, it's passive entertainment. You have no control over it. You're just sat there absorbing it. That's what's so interesting and buzzword about video games, because you are controlling it. It's when a game takes advantage of the fact that you have some kind of way to affect this world, then the story potential is kind of endless. Which brings me on to another game, which I kind of skipped past for some reason. I'm sorry if this is going a bit long, but I have a lot of answers for it. Anyway, that game is Skyrim. I know I've been noticing a lot of people sort of backlashing on Skyrim, saying, oh, it's not as good as Oblivion or Morrowind or whatever, but that's always the cycle, isn't it? A new one comes out, everyone has to hate it and say the old one was better, and then a new one will come out and everyone will go flop back to Skyrim again. But Skyrim is funny because it's almost for the exact opposite reasons for the previous two games I just talked about. Because I don't care about the story or anything that particularly happens in the game, but what it changed or made me think about was just how, kind of like Final Fantasy XII, how vast and just ridiculous how much stuff there is to just do. And it was in that perfect sweet spot where I had the time to like constantly play it and sink my teeth into this, because I'd never played an Elder Scrolls game before, or any Bethesda game really for that matter at that point. So again, it's going to be one of those really special lightning in a bottle, this is the pinnacle of a certain thing for me type situation. And it's really cheesy to say it, but you know, you make your own story in those games, don't you? When you go up the hill and a dragon appears and blasts you off a cliff and you go ragdoll, that's like a funny moment, and you remember it, and that's your story, and that's why that game will always be special to me. And finally, I'm going to wrap with one more game that is another recent one, but that I find so profoundly incredible and of such a good quality that this one has changed the way I think in terms of when I was playing it for the first time, I couldn't help but just say out loud, mind, wow, oh my god. Like, I just had to put the controller down and just put my hands in the air, put my hands on my forehead. This is too good. And that's Ori and the Blind Forest. Like, I don't know what it is. There's some magic about that game that has just completely transfixed me. There's something about it. I know you can point and dissect it easily and say, oh, it's just a Metroidvania, 2D platformer thing, but it's so perfect to me. From the music to the gameplay to the abilities to the set pieces, I just want to play it all the time, and I want to just absorb it into myself. And it's kind of ruined my life, because now if something is even slightly wasting my time, I just think I could be playing Ori and the Blind Forest right now, but you have to be wasting my fucking time with this bullshit. So yeah, those are some things some video games specifically that have changed the way I think about things. And it's quite a broad thing, so I sort of interpreted it in the way I wanted to. So that's what I did at the end, full stop. So what are some video games specifically that have changed your views or made you look at things differently? Like, I'm sure a lot of people will say the first BioShock or Half-Life or something like that. Oh yeah, quick shout out to Portal 2, another one, really good storytelling one. That's another thing I could just go into. So tell me what you think in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. Make sure you leave suggestions for future Jar Blabs. I'll see you next time. Bye. Content with it. And I think certain long-running series, they start to kind of look cash grabby or kind of pointless. And when you really think about all the big series like your Halos, your Uncharted, do they really need to continue past the trilogy point? Does there need to be an Uncharted 4? Does there need to be a Halo 5? Does there need to be a Halo 4? Obviously, it's a financial decision, and if a game sold like 10 million copies, they're going to make a sequel to it, because there's